Our next presentation is by Alicia Kaur from Wayne State University, Improving Community Awareness for Detroit River Fish Consumption Guidelines. It's good to hear from Rock City. Thanks, Alicia.
Rock City. Good afternoon. Like I said, my name is Alicia Kaur from Wayne State University, and I'm going to go a little bit further away from the trend of the room. I'm not going to talk about the river in particular. And I'm not going to talk about actually engaging citizens in science. I'm going to talk about making citizens a little bit more aware of the science that's being done and how those results could effectively direct their health or the health of their loved ones. So I'm talking about just improving community awareness for the Detroit River Fish Consumption Guidelines. So just a quick overview, just a background, talk about the Detroit River, the history, and the history of the pollution in the river. Talk about our three-pronged approach to education, the Riverwalkers, the signs, and surveys. Briefly, just talk about some of the count data, and then make some general conclusions from those results. So basically, the Detroit River is actually just a strait. It connects Lake St. Clair to Lake Erie, which also means that it connects the St. Lawrence to the Erie Canal, which makes it one of the busiest waterways in the world. Much of the land is urban and heavily industrialized. In that Google map, Detroit is on the west side or the left side of that map. Windsor, Ontario is on the right side. You can see how heavily urban and industrialized it is. Very little farmland. Some on the Canadian shoreline to the south of the city of Windsor. It became heavily polluted in the early 20th century with the industrialization of the area with the automotive industry primarily. So again, this is just a map just showing how it's situated in the mitten. Everyone likes to see a map of Michigan, so it's looking like a hand. So it's in the southeastern lower corner of the state of Michigan, again, between Lake St. Clair to the north and Lake Erie to the south. And again, you can see how heavily urban and industrialized it is. So due to that industrialization, there was a lot of unregulated dumping of chemicals in the early 20th century, primarily lead, mercury, and PCBs. It became so bad at one point that it was deemed unsafe for recreational use. And thousands of migratory birds were killed each year. This is actually an oil slick coming out of the Rouge River, which is just north. There's a fishing site 25 feet to the right of the Rouge right here, and this is an oil slick coming out. And there were pictures of birds where there's thousands of migratory birds that were killed every year, all along 28 miles of the Detroit River. As a result also of this pollution, oxygen levels were too low in a lot of areas that it couldn't even support fish populations. This next bullet is really interesting. In 1970, the entire Canadian fishing industry was closed in Lake St. Clair, Detroit River, and Lake Erie. And even though mercury was reclassified as a toxic substance, there was no closure on the Michigan side, on the U.S. side at all. So just an interesting tidbit there that I thought was kind of hit home for me. Again, these high contaminant levels create a potential health risk for people who consume these fish from the river. And the advisories that we're looking to gauge awareness of were mandated as a result of the Clean Water Act of the 1970s. So these advisories are issued by federal, state, and local governments. Each state, there's one for the state of Michigan, one for the state of Ohio, one for the state of Illinois. All the Great Lakes border states have their own. And these advisories apply to certain types. You have different kinds. There's certain ones for rivers, certain ones for lakes that have no inflow or outflow just because of the different contaminant load that you may find in each individual body of water. And the majority of these focus on certain groups who may be particularly sensitive. Women of childbearing age, the elderly, people with an underlying medical condition, young children primarily, are what these are aimed at. So our objective was just to quantify the effectiveness of the educational efforts, and we have a three-pronged approach, which were signs along the river, the entire length of the river from Lake St. Clair to Lake Erie, which we hung ourselves. It's actually a picture of the sign from last year. They were replaced this past spring. Educational pamphlets, which are passed out by the Riverwalkers, and then those same Riverwalkers engage the fishermen and give them that same information orally. This is a picture of the site. This is just north of the Detroit River, of downtown Detroit here. Showing them catching the white bass. This was done during the height of the white bass run, and I just like to note that during the white bass run, that first picture, all the public access sites are pretty much shoulder-to-shoulder fishing. it's shoulder to shoulder for about a month straight. And there's a large amount of subsistence fishing going on at that time. So these folks are catching fish that have high contaminant loads and put them in the freezer and eating into the winter and feeding their families. Okay, so we conducted surveys for 3 years beginning in 2008 and alternating in 2013, 2015. Just wanted to note that the survey responded, the demographics closely matched the city of Detroit, about 86% African American, about 10% Caucasian, and with the rest being distributed amongst different demographic groups. So we wanted to gauge the awareness of the potential health hazards, consumption limits, and assess changes in knowledge over time. Again, in 2008, that initial year, some of the sites were actually done on the Canadian shoreline, but it was a U.S. funding source and they have not supported us going back to Canada. So as a result, we have not included any of the 2008 data. I just wanted to illustrate that we do have 3 years of data at this point that could be looked at, but we excluded it. So this is a new sign that we posted this past spring. We posted 45 signs along the entire length of the Detroit River. Some sites got multiple signs. We tried to place them at points that were easily seen, leaving parking lots going to the fishing site, or in the most popular spots on that site for people to fish. So we did 8 sites in 2008, 19, and 2013, and we lowered that to 16 in 2015. There were a couple sites that were no longer maintained by the city of Detroit due to some funding issues. So the first method of the educational efforts were the Riverwalkers. Here's a picture of Robert, one of our Riverwalkers, a retired policeman, and in undergrad is out with him. So they go out and engage the anglers and give them information to help them make informed choices about eating fish that are lower in chemical contaminants. They give a verbal delivery. You know, in the city of Detroit, there's an issue with literacy. There's a high level a low level of literacy in the city. I believe it's about 70% was one of the last numbers I saw. So it's really high. So they decided to make sure that the information is delivered verbally as well as in the pamphlets and on the signs. So they distributed the Eat Safe Fish pamphlet and other educational materials. There's a cookbook and some information on how to properly prepare the fish as well. Not just in words, but in pictures also. So the next educational effort were the pamphlets and the printed guidelines. One of the things they really wanted to do with the pamphlets is to emphasize the benefits of fish consumption. And if you go out and you tell these people that there's a high contaminant load, there's mercury, there's lead, you really should be careful. Don't feed it to your kids. Some people may not go out and take advantage of the resource that's there. So one of the emphasis is that it's okay, you know, you're going to get good health benefits, omega-3 fatty acids, whatever the case may be, and to continue to utilize the resource, you know, as a source of food and sustenance for your family. So that's really emphasized in the pamphlets. And then those pamphlets also discuss the consumption recommendations. And those are based on serving size. So here's a picture at the bottom which explains that 8 ounces is about the size of an adult's hand. 4 ounces and down to 2 ounces, so that they can kind of make informed decisions, you know, because most of the folks, myself included, if I have a fish fry, I'm not looking at the size of my hand. You know, it's a platter. It's a platter. So we really try to drive that home. So those recommendations are based on serving sizes. Fish species, this is an example. Walleye, one of the most popular species on the river, white bass. White bass is limited, so you should eat very little of those. Walleye, which brings in billions of dollars to the Great Lakes, Lake Erie, Detroit River. You can see it's only 6 per year. And if you properly prepare those, you can double it to 12 per year. Again, during the height of the walleye run, you know, there's folks, you know, it's more like 6 meals a week on walleye. So we really want to drive home the importance of following those consumption recommendations for these fish. It can really make a difference in their health and, again, the health of their children. Also in that pamphlet, we talk about getting to know the 3 C's, choose, clean, and cook, which is to choose fish that are lower, have lower contaminant loads, bluegill, yellow perch, things of that nature. Get away from the white perch, which is pretty difficult because that's the main focus when the white bass are running. Clean, properly clean, to remove the head and entrails, to leave a thin layer of flesh when the fish is skinned, remove the lateral line, any yellow or reddish meat that may be higher in fat content and thus have a higher contaminant load. So we really stress how to properly clean those, and also to cook, to not make soups or chowders, because you're gonna pick up more chemicals, to broil more, and let them know that it's okay to fry as long as the oils change. A lot of people have a habit of frying fish, saving that oil, and then using it over and over and over. So we try to get them to use an ulterior way of preparing. So just briefly, some of the results. This was, do you know about, a question from the survey. Do you know about the Michigan Eat Safe Fish Guidelines? In 13, there was about a 60% to 40%. And in 2015, we had more respondents, but it was almost 50-50. So there were more people that did not know. It can kind of be attributed to the fact that there was a larger sample size, and a few other things I'll talk about later. The next one was, how have you received the best information? This was a question that wasn't asked in 2013, but you can see that the signs were deemed to be the best. And those, again, I really don't think they like to be bugged by the Riverwalkers when they're fishing. When the white bass run is really going, I mean, these guys are catching 2 and 3 fish at a time on one line. And doing the surveys, I'm ducking and dodging and getting out of the way. And so I really don't think they like to be bothered. The brochures, I really don't think they look at, to be honest. Some do. But the signs are right there. They can see them. They can look at them at their own leisure. And also there are some pictures there that also outline some of the things, so they really don't have to read it. Interesting here, was the information on the signs helpful to you? In 2013, over 90% said yes. And in 2015, it really dropped about 65% or so. Again, a larger sample size. I got a little formatting issue, so I lost my sample size on the right hand. But it was at least double that 87 on the left. So there was a drop in people saying that the signs were helpful. And almost last one. Has the brochure influenced how or where you fish at all? About 50-50, yes or no in 2013. In 2015, that really dropped. The yeses did. And part of this, we have to try to glean, I think, one of the reasons behind this is that with the economy the way that it is in the state, there are a lot of people who are doing the subsistence fishing, and they have to go catch those fish. And they don't really want to say, yeah, I know about it, but I have to do it. So I think we have to really take a look at the survey and try to figure out a way to ask those questions to glean how, are they being honest or forthright, or are they concerned with, coming off as being uncaring about the health of their family. And also this one has the information from the Riverwalkers helpfully. In 2013 it was a lot higher. 2015 it dropped again. Again, with the increase in sample size, I really think it's got a lot to do with the subsistence fishery. They don't want to admit, yeah, I got it, and I understand it, but I'm doing this anyway. So we'll be addressing that in further future surveys, excuse me. So just some brief conclusions. In 2013, most anglers reached by the Riverwalkers gained useful information. Overall results show that educational efforts are effective. And there was a result that I couldn't show. I shouldn't have had this bullet point in here because I didn't show it. But anglers in the lowest income and educational levels need to be targeted. They have the least understanding. I have a chi-square, if anyone wants to see that after presentation, showing that they have the least awareness of the guidelines. And due to that, there could be some possible environmental justice issues that could be looked at in the future by someone else. So. Yes, ma'am.
I hate to say this way, but has anything like a needle exchange program been looked at so that the species caught with the highest possibility of contamination could be exchanged for uncontaminated fish?
Not that I'm aware of, but the volume is so high. I don't think that there's a funding agency out there that can handle it. I mean, these folks are walking off the Detroit River with literally hundreds of white bass at one time. Yes, ma'am.
I think this is a really awesome project, really cool. Have you done any interaction with some of like the local fishing shops? Is that something that you guys do too?
Not as far as interviews. The pamphlets are dropped off at places like that, but we haven't had any direct interaction with big stores.
Yeah.
Just the public.
You can take one more question.
Is the decision on White Bass just White Bass just supposed to run fish available, or is it hard? I guess I'm asking why is it so hard to get people more interested in other species?
You want to know why is it hard to get more people interested in other species besides white? Just because it's so easy to catch the white bass. Literally when the white bass will run in Detroit River, you can throw a bare hook out, a gold hook, and catch fish. So it's really easy and it's very low cost. No need for real serious